need to make deeper human connections. That's the goal that we have. So our AI has no intention of, trying to replace the teacher. We always like to kind of be transparent in our, experiences with educators when we talk to them about AI, about being aware and in control. We kind of use this analogy from the U.S. Office of Educational Technology, of an electric bike, right? So if you've ever ridden one of those crazy electric bikes that they have now, or the electric scooters, right? The human is fully in control. It's not really going anywhere unless you are giving it the direction of where to go. But once you're on that bike and giving it the direction, it makes it a whole lot easier to be able to get to where you need to go. And that's the idea behind using AI or using school AI, is that ultimately the educator has that professionalism to be able to make decisions for their students. Your kids, what their needs are. We're just using AI to get to that end point and get to that solution a whole lot easier. Now, educators, this is sort of my life's mission, is, before and after joining School AI, is to create an opportunity for educators to free up some of the time that they're spending not with students, right? So teachers work about 50 hours a week, spending less than half of the time in direct interaction with students. As a former educator, I remember spending a lot of time doing administrative tasks. And by the time, I get to my students, I'm ready to just implement those tasks and then, kind of watch from the sidelines, because I was so burnt out from having all these other things that I had. And so I really wanted to make these deeper connections, but I just didn't physically have the time to be able to do so. So what we're looking to do with School AI is to provide teachers with more time to work with students. So these are some of the different ways that AI can help teachers, writing assessments, planning lessons, creating projects. These are things I actually used AI for all the time. I could, design a lesson, but maybe I was really struggling to come up with a creative way to assess my students. So I would go to AI and say, hey, here's my project. How can I creatively assess students? Well, I could do a movie making project. I could do this. And then it would create rubrics for me. It would create sort of the guidelines of the questions and the worksheets. Now, realistically, can I do all of those things? Absolutely. But the idea here is that for me as an educator, that would take me hours upon hours of work. And so in what we're doing here is we're kind of reducing the amount of time that it takes to get that initial first idea, so that way I can focus on making it specifically for my students. So teachers are the final filter. When I do my trainings with educators, I always tell them, whatever AI makes you is the first draft. You are going to then review that first draft. Now, sometimes the first draft of what we make is great, right? And it's great to begin with, and we just have to make subtle little tweaks to it. And sometimes it's a hot mess and we have to start over again and we have to revamp. So really understanding that this is something that teachers are using in tandem with their experience and their expertise. They know their students, they have the professional background. So looking at this from a first draft perspective of, here's what I have first, what do I need to do? Now, here's where School AI comes in. So I've talked to you a lot about just AI in general and what AI can do for teachers and for students. So School AI provides a framework to support teachers and students as they learn how to use AI. So a lot of times people will ask us, like, do you have any formal AI literacy content? And it's sort of like this idea of digital citizenship. Yes, it's great to teach these types of literacy skills, on their own in a standalone format, but it's even more powerful when they can practice these skills in an organic setting. And that's what our platform strives to do. We strive to create these conscientious, these collaborative, critical, and creative experiences for students, that they are doing so through the use of the School AI platform. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about data safety, because I know as parents and guardians, this is probably one of the major concerns that you have about your students using AI. So the way that AI works is that, with a large language model, that type of AI, which is what we're using, a large language model produces mainly text output. is that it's using its entire knowledge. So that anything that's public domain, anything that's public knowledge that it has used, but it's also as you are interacting with an AI like ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Microsoft Copilot, as you are interacting with those different AI models, it is then storing your information to use as training its large language model. And so that is one of the major concerns about having anyone, individuals using large language models is what kind of data are you putting into there, and is it sensitive or private information? Now, with using a platform like SchoolAI, we sort of view this as sort of like a walled garden type of situation or a fortress type of situation. The idea is that we have contracted with OpenAI's ChatGPT, that's our large language model that we use. But part of our contract is that none of our data goes back to train their large language model. So when a staff member or teacher puts in, the prompting, creates the space, students go and interact with that space. None of that data from the students or the teachers is leaving our secure US-based servers. It is all staying within our server so that information comes out, but part of our contract is that it is not going back to train the large language models that we are using. So we really want to make sure that everyone knows that that data is being filtered, is being contained. Any sort of interactions are being anonymized and encrypted on our servers. So that way that AI model has no idea what it's actually even looking at. It just has what it needs to be able to answer the questions and create that personalized learning experience. Okay. Before I start talking about the resources from SchoolAI, what questions do you have? What's kind of floating around in your brain from any of the slides I've talked about previously?
Hi, I'm John, and
Yeah.
I'm actually affiliated with the AI Clemson Hub in USC as well down here.
Oh,
And
wow.
one of the things that I would had a question on with your large language model, or you said you're using ChatGPT, but are there plans of creating your own language model, like because people can use ChatGPT or the structure of it and then train their own model? Is that because there's a lot of nefarious stuff on the web and and it's scraping everything that's out there? Is there plans to have like a concentrated model and train your own, or are you pretty much going to try to just filter what's out there and use the GPT as is?
That's a fantastic question. Right now, our team, we're actually just a startup company. We're a startup in the sense that of how the size of our company, as well as the length of time that we've been in existence. We have been a company for a little less than 2 full years, but only open to the public for public use for a little less than a year. We had been in beta testing for about 9 months before that with one of the largest school districts in Utah, which is where our home base is. And when I joined the company back in January, there were 11 of us. Now we have 35, so we're huge now. But realistically, we just don't have the bandwidth to develop our own large language model and be able to kind of conceptualize all the necessary pieces that we've been able to create by using ChatGPT. When you mentioned like the idea of the nefarious content, the filtering pieces, that's been in place from the very beginning. That idea of the content that your students are seeing in their interactions on SchoolAI have been vetted, filtered, are really controlled in the environment. And you're going to be able to see that in just a few minutes when I launch a space with all of you. So you're going to be able to actually interact like your students will when they are interacting in spaces. So no definitive plans to develop our own large language model, but at this point, I don't rule out any possibilities because where we started when I first joined in January to where we are now has made my head spin in the best way possible. So anything is possible at this point, but no definitive plans in the works as of right now. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. And I do know that there's many companies that develop their own because it gives better responses, more
Sure.
targeted responses, and considering the population here, I would think, that would be thought about. But I understand being a small company, this is a good place to start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're just that's our biggest constraint is just manpower, woman power, bandwidth. That's our biggest constraint right now. It is definitely not capabilities. Our developers are some of the most brilliant, amazing human beings that I have probably ever worked with in my career. And anything is possible. Oops, people in the waiting room. Anything is possible. I don't discount anything at this point. Who knows? What you see right now may very well change, down the road. So it'll stay tuned. That's what I tell people. Awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and keep on moving. All right, so we have three main resources on School AI. We have assistants, tools, and spaces. Assistants and tools are primarily educator resources. So your students will not be engaging in the assistance on School AI or on the tools on School AI. Those are specifically teacher productivity resources. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into what that looks like for educators. We are doing trainings experiences with Trident Academy educators to help support them in leveraging these tools at the highest level. I personalize all of my training experiences for my different school and partner districts. So I, know the unique needs of your student populations, your staff, experiences and needs, and tailor that learning experience for them into how this is going to best serve your students. So teachers can use assistants to create reading passages, to level text, to adjust information, to create questions. They can use it to create little experiences for their students, right? And this is how they can kind of use the assistants over in the space experience where they actually start engaging as a student or with the students. My favorite use that I have seen actually from one of my educators is very similar to this. This was one of my, most amazing educators I've ever worked with. And she used to love to introduce each unit of her high school level science classes in different accents and voices. So one day she had it do like an introduction to cell biology as in the voice of a pirate, and then straight up read her introduction in the voice of a pirate. And like when I tell you that 17 and 18-year-olds were like rolling on the floor laughing, it's just that's the kind of power of when you think about this in a creative way, what you can kind of do with these generative AI chats. So things that teachers can use assistants to do are all of these sort of administrative tasks, right? We have these state standards that we have to align to. We can use it to unpack those standards, really break it down into meaningful information that we can use to instruct students and then map out their curriculum for a quarter or a semester. Using it to create rubrics, generating vocabulary lists, modifying assignments to meet the needs and abilities of students. So that one is really unique, the idea of thinking about those needs. Now, even though our platform, and I totally skipped over this, our platform is FERPA and COPA compliant, and those are two child protection, privacy acts that, if you're not as familiar with, basically say that you cannot share any personal identifiable information with, these other third-party external organizations. And so we have our FERPA and COPA compliant information that your educators are sharing is going to any outside sources. It is stored securely and privately. We also don't collect any student personal information in the student experience. So you're going to see how they are going to sort of anonymously, it's not officially anonymously, but you'll see kind of how they are joining spaces and engaging in spaces without sharing any personal identifiable information. So when we talk about now, having said all of that, even though we have these safety measures in place, when I do my trainings with teachers, I explain to them like, yes, you can, in theory, put in personal information about your students because it is safe. However, good AI literacy practices do, recommend that we never put any sort of personal identifiable information into a large language model. That's just a good habit to get into. So even though I tell people it is safe to do so, I don't recommend it. I recommend using like anonymized information, right? Student A or student number 13 or whatever the case may be to kind of get that information. But the ability to really think about what students need to be able to modify assignments quickly and easily, that is really what the power of AI can do to personalize experiences for students. Now, tools is the other teacher productivity resource that we have, and these are document generators. So if those of you who are familiar with the idea of AI and generative AI chats, these tools are what we sort of refer to in the ed tech industry as like AI wrappers, right? So if you've gone to a website that says like, use AI to generate a, contract, use AI to generate, that's an AI wrapper. It's basically putting a little wrapper on the large language model on ChatGPT or, Claude or Gemini or whatever, where it already tells the AI, this is what you're creating, and you're creating this type of document. And then educators just have to come in and sort of personalize the specific pieces of what we want the AI to do with that particular type of document. So if I wanted to use the text leveler, all I would do is put into the text leveling tool the exact text that I have, and then ask it to adjust to a particular different grade level or Lexile level or something along those lines. Text translator is one we use a lot in our partner schools and districts because we have a lot of students all across the country and even in our national schools that are speaking multiple languages or have different home languages that they're using. So being able to provide that quick and easy language translation is a really useful resource. Now, as an educator, I loved a rubric because it's very clear expectations. It communicates easily and concisely to students. These are the end goals. This is the objective you're working towards. But rubrics take forever to personalize, to specify, to make them exactly the way you want, heck, to format them, like they just take forever. So having the ability to very quickly and easily generate a rubric is a huge resource. So I use this a lot with my special education teachers, behavior intervention plans, IEP goals. Now, having said that, even though we have these tools, I really, really emphasize when I'm working with special educators that these tools are a first draft. They are that initial idea. So your students, you're looking at the whole child. And so really using these as a starting point, as a foundational piece is important to remember because especially for behavior intervention plans for IEPs and IEP goals, those types of things, this is just a big general idea. You're going to then personalize that specifically to the needs of your students. Okay, what questions do you have about the teacher productivity side of things? Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to pop over actually to our website. Oh, I see some questions coming in the chat. Yes, this is being recorded. Yep. I'm going to pop over to our website now, and you're going to get to see what SchoolAI looks like for educators. So this is our SchoolAI website. You'll notice again, here's those tools and assistants that educators can use. If I pop over to the tools, here's all the different documents they can generate, worksheets, story word problems, all kinds of great resources here. Here are our different assistants. These are all different generative AI chats. Co-teacher is actually ChatGPT 4, so they're getting the paid model of ChatGPT. And in some cases, they're getting some of the features of ChatGPT 4.0, like image analysis, additional outputs and questioning, sort of the Socratic questioning style to kind of continue that AI literacy journey, but all kinds of different assistants that they can use to save time. So again, tools and assistants are not things that your students will see. These are going to be specifically for educators. But spaces are what your students are going to be interacting with. And spaces are AI chatbots that are designed by educators specifically for students to create a personalized chat experience. Now, if that alone is not exciting enough, it's the idea that in addition to students getting that personalized experience, the teachers have full transparency over what their students are chatting with. So they can see exactly what their students are engaging with, the conversations that they're having, the questions they're asking. And then our teacher dashboard that I'll show you in just a minute is going to engage them with even more data to connect with them on an emotional level, to connect with them if they're stuck on something. So just to give you a quick little overview, all of our spaces, and for anyone who, is having a hard time kind of conceptualizing the idea of a chat bot. So I'm sure we have various comfort levels with AI. Think about a chat bot like you would a customer service chat bot on a website, right? You are typing in a little bit of information. The chat bot is then sort of deciphering what you've typed in, trying to give you some solutions or asking you follow-up questions, all AI generated just based on the chat that you've put in. Then you answer those questions, and then it maybe gives you a solution, maybe directs you to another website, or eventually, if your question can't be answered by an AI, it's going to direct you to a human being. And that's where we have this situation here, where the educator is initially setting up this learning experience, but there's always going to be that human piece in every single one of these experiences. The educators are reviewing the chats. They're looking for data trends and areas for growth for students. They're making those deeper connections with students. So when we designed our spaces, again, spaces are these AI chatbots, we really took a sort of learning approach to this. We did not want to be in the business of just providing AI to students for the sake of AI. So we're not in the business of like, here's an AI chatbot, go. That is not what we're about. We wanted to make sure that these were all experiences rooted in learning. And so that's what all of our spaces have been designed to do. They have been designed to provide a learning experience for students. So we have spaces that are aligned with state standards. We also have spaces that are things that teachers and educators are using every single day. So bell ringer is something that as a secondary teacher, I would launch to engage my students' prior knowledge. I would look for what do they already know about this topic? What do I need to teach differently or, slow down or speed up? So this kind of chat experience gives students an opportunity to explore a new topic. Now, we want to be able to give them the power of AI assistance, but we also want it to be very controlled. And so we've designed Sidekick to serve as an AI assistant. Now, again, this is the teacher side of SchoolAI, so your students wouldn't be seeing any of this. But when I'm designing my Sidekick, I'm telling it exactly what I want it to do with my students, the parameters that I'm setting for it, what it can and cannot chat with students. And that's just what I am putting in as an educator. On the SchoolAI side, we have already set up a million different filters for content, for appropriateness, for the way that the interaction should look and feel. All of those pieces have been set up by our SchoolAI team to drive this experience with the intention of learning, of developing these ideas and skills. So I, as a teacher, put in what kind of assistance I wanted to have. And so it could be answering questions on a particular topic. It could be doing practice problems. It could be brainstorming new ideas. It could be anything that I want my students to have help and assistance with. But again, every single one of these student experiences, these spaces, I, as the educator, have full view of everything that my students are interacting with and chatting with. So let's play. Let's get into a space and have you all explore a little bit of what students are seeing. So if you have a cell phone and you want to scan that QR code, you're welcome to do so. If you have a computer, you are welcome to go to schoolai.com/join. Don't forget, I'm going to put it back up there. I'm sorry. There we go. You can go to schoolai.com/join and then put in your name and that 4-digit code. For those of you who are joining us virtually, I'm going to go ahead and put this join link in the chat so you can join that link. Now, this space has been specifically designed for you as family and community members. So this is not, you're not going to see this like you're a student. So you're going to go ahead and just engage. So again, you can scan this QR code or go to schoolai.com/join and put in your name and this 4-digit code. And you don't have to put in your actual name if you want. When I do this with students, I do tell them, put your actual name in. And I tell them why. It's because I want to be able to use this information to support you, to provide experiences for you. So go ahead and jump into that at schoolai.com/join with your name and that 4-digit code, or scan the QR code. All right. Does anyone still need that QR code or the 4-digit code? Good to go?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Great, awesome. Now, what you're seeing over, so real quickly, what you're seeing here, this is my teacher dashboard. I promise I'm going to come back to that. Over here, I'm going to join as a student, and this is what it actually looks like for students. They see this name box, they type in their name. Now, if we're launching through our learning management system platform, then it will skip this name box for them because it automatically inputs their name for them. So as a teacher of middle school students, as much as I love my sweet babies, I know what kind of shenanigans they are capable of. So I love the idea that when I launch through my learning management system, that it skips this name box and just puts in their correct name. Now, something to note is, again, because we are FERPA and COPA compliant, we are not collecting any student personal identifiable information. As far as our servers and model are concerned, this is just random letters and numbers. Doesn't mean anything. So there's no personal information attached to this. All right. So this is a chatbot. Go ahead and answer the questions, engage with this, ask it any questions that you have. You can pressure test my space. I designed this sort of last minute. It was one of those like early morning wake up thoughts. And I was like, oh, I should launch a What is School AI space for this group. This is my challenge here, is that I can't help myself. And I just think about designing spaces all the time. So pressure test it. Let me know how I did. It should stay pretty much on task, but you'll be the judge of that. But go ahead and just see how the questions are being asked. Go ahead and just engage with it however you like. So if I say, I don't know much, let's see how it responds. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes or so to just kind of engage with this a little bit. And this space does know that it is made for adults. And so this is a little bit more text than typically you would see with like an elementary level space, which you'll be able to see a couple of different spaces as well to be able to see the differences between the elementary and the secondary level ones. So go ahead and just engage. I'll stop jibber jabbering. I don't do silence real well, so I'm going to put on a little music. Nonsense. Great. Sorry, that's what my children were listening to was Sesame Street last night.
That's fine. I could relearn my ABCs.
Right. The most recent song was Cookie Monster's "Me Lost My Cookie at the Disco." So you can look it out.
The classics. can't imagine what's saying about me right now. So I'm trying to put in like inappropriate things.
Crazy. Yeah.
I'm proud of you all for pressure testing. Good job.
Yeah.
You met the assignment. Nobody's gone too off the rails, though. I mean, pretty close. But gone pretty close. But this also recognizes that these are children who are still kind of developing in their good decision-making skills. All right, I'm gonna give you about 30 more seconds.
My favorite response so far to what I typed in was, I'm here to keep our conversation respectful and focused on learning. If you have any questions about SchoolAI, please feel free to share.
What does the face mean there? Beside my name, I have a sad face. Does
Yeah,
that mean I
great
tried
question.
to use plagiarism?
It is the tone of the chat.
I use markers probably. I don't know.
Yeah,
Unless
so
it's
we're
music
definitely gonna talk about
Thing
that.
is really good artist. I would let her help it. And you can, I'll bring the bag too, just in case. It's kind of cute if you put it on the table. I know.
All right, I'm about to make some of you really mad because you're having a good time, but I'm about to pause our space, which I'm very proud of you all. You absolutely met the
Have a good
assignment.
day. I'll pick you up in carpal line.
Okay.
All right, folks. So something that you might have noticed is that in your student side of the space, it has removed the little text box and said, hang tight, this session's been paused. This is something I use with my students to actually refocus them. I will just pause the space if I want to give them like a little bit of instruction, if I want to follow up with anything. I can also individually pause student spaces. So if somebody's going a little off the rails, which I saw some of you doing, which I'm very proud of you, that was exactly what you should be doing. Then I can go in and I can manually pause individuals, give them a little bit of a teacher look, because as a former middle school and early high school teacher, I know that if they see that hang tight, the session's been paused and they're being goofballs, they're going to look up at me right away because they know I'm watching them. Now, I had kind of alluded to this a couple of times, so I'm curious to see how many of you actually kind of sort of heard and retained that information. This has full transparency for me as an educator. I can see every single individual chat for all of my students. So I can pull these up and I can see, okay, here's what the AI said. Here's what this participant said. Here's what they talked about next, right? So all of these things are totally transparent to me. And I tell students that. I want to communicate that to them. I say, just so you know, when you are interacting with these spaces, I can see everything that you are writing. And I tell them, it's not because I'm trying to be a creeper and watch what you're doing. It's because I'm using this data to make informed decisions about who needs my help, what we need to focus on next. Do I need to speed up because y'all get it? Do I need to slow down because y'all are lost? So this is data that I use as an educator to make informed decisions about my instructional practices and who needs my support the most. So many of you saw right away these little sentiment emojis. These indicate the tone of the chat. So it doesn't have anything to do with on task. Well, sometimes it's overlapping with on task behavior, but it doesn't have anything to do with like the progress of how much of the space you've done or anything. This is purely an emotional check-in for me. Now, sometimes these show up in red if the content is really negative, and that happens, right? But in this case, this was a pretty positive content area. You were talking about SchoolAI. So I pulled up, Ben, if Ben was my student, I would pull up and look right away and say like, okay, what's Ben talking about? Oh man, friend was talking about plagiarizing. All right, I better go and check in. Does it go to the rails? Okay, all right. So writing the essay for, all right. So not exactly what I had in mind. That might be a conversation that I have with Ben. But again, this is where that transparency comes into place. This is developing those good AI literacy skills. Now, the reason it kind of let you write that essay was because the idea was for in this space, you're exploring what SchoolAI can do. And so that's why it was letting you get away with a little bit extra of what SchoolAI can do to support teachers and students. But down here, as you heard Kyle saying, right? We went, and not to put you on blast, Kyle, but I was really proud of you that you did this. we use some inappropriate language here, right? And I loved the AI's response. I'm here to keep our conversation respectful and focused on learning, right? I'm sorry to hear there's some tension because, Joey is a jerk, right? I hate everything. I'm sorry you're feeling that way, right? So this is really, it's designed to support students where they're at in terms of their developmental level, what they need, how they're communicating. So these sentiment emojis are the first thing I look at as an educator because I want to go and follow up. And maybe Kyle's just having a really salty day that day, and I need to go and check in with Kyle and say, like, hey, are you doing okay, friend? Like, I see that you're really struggling to be appropriate in the chat. And maybe that's all the conversation I have, and that's all that Kyle needs to get back, on task. But maybe something's really going on with Kyle that I need to go and follow up with, and maybe direct to a counselor or talk to a trusted adult. So this kind of insight is things I would not normally know unless I was able to have that conversation with that student. As a teacher of teenagers, they are stealthy little ninjas when it comes to their feelings sometimes. They do not want to share unless they feel super, super, super comfortable with you. And that is a challenge sometimes. And so this really gave me insight into my kids at a much deeper level. Now, I've been jibber jabbering for more than 5 minutes, so all our little circles have turned gray, but you might have noticed that when you were actively engaged, these were all green. That tells me who is actually engaged in chatting. After 2 minutes of inactivity, they turn yellow, and after 5 minutes of inactivity, they turn gray. I also get all of these little insights over here on the side that I can see all of this information about what the AI thinks is notable. So when, Kyle expressed feelings of hatred towards everything during the discussion about school AI, it noted that for me. Now, I also, as an educator, love this ability to use what we call smart groupings. And smart groupings will take the purpose of the space, right? So this one was to engage you in learning and talking about school AI. It'll take the purpose of the space and derive a rubric from it. And it will put students into one of 3 or 4 groups, right? So Kyle and Maureen, we were, kind of not really exploring the space with its intended purpose. So we were down at the bottom here. Then we had some people who were sort of like emerging in the right area. They were going in the right direction. Then we had some people who were really exploring in a really positive way, right? So this tells me which students do I need to follow up with and give some personalized instruction to and support, because either they're really just not getting it or they're really having a rough time of it. So this data is not just, this is where I tell teachers when they, their knee-jerk reaction sometimes is, this is going to take my job. To an AI, these are just letters and numbers on a page. It doesn't mean anything to the machine. To us as educators, these are connections. These are needs. These are human connection interaction pieces. It's all in what we as phenomenal educators that you have at Trident Academy, they know what to do with this data, and they know how to make it meaningful and how to connect with kids. Now, one last thing I want to show you, which is that none of you went too off the rails, and that's good. But also I want to show you what it's going to do to safeguard your students. Let's say that a student put something really concerning in here. So trigger warning. I'm going to put something really concerning into the chat. Notice it says, I'm sorry you're feeling this way. It's important to talk to someone who can provide support, like a trusted adult or a mental health professional. And notice what just happened. The chat paused itself. So it knows that the student is communicating something very concerning. It does not want them to continue interacting because this could go down a real dark hole. And if some of you have been following the news, there's a lot of major, concerns going on with students using sort of, emotional connection AI experiences. And then on the teacher dashboard, I am alerted right away with this red alert notification that Maureen has communicated something that's really concerning, right? Now, sometimes it's a little overzealous and sometimes it flags things that, are contextually appropriate. So, things like I was doing one about the causes of the US Civil War the other day, and somebody was mentioning like racism and it flagged that. And I was like, all right, friend, that was a little overzealous. And I appreciate your efforts to try to keep my kiddos safe and on task and things. So I do have the ability to override this and to resume the chat if it is appropriate. But I'd rather it be overzealous and catch things, that could potentially really be, dangerous than for it to not catch those things and, be too lenient. This is going to catch any sexually inappropriate content, any mentions of illegal activity, mentions of self-harm, of violence, anything that is going to be majorly concerning that the AI does not want the student to continue interacting with. Now, I can resume the chat and then close out these teacher notifications, but I'm still always going to see these insights. And I can pull up this chat anytime and share this with my administrators to go and follow, or families and guardians to be able to say, hey, this is really concerning, and I just want you to be aware of this. It could be nothing, but it could be something. All right, what questions do y'all have about what you saw as students or what we see as teachers?
Hi, so when you're training the children to use this, do you tell them that everything you write is recorded? And, okay, I just want to
I
see.
do. I 100% practice transparency with them. And again, like I said, I tell them it's not because I want to be creepy and like watching over them. It's because this data helps me be a better teacher. And another thing that I love to do with this is like a little personal story. When I would launch a bell ringer with my students, because that was something that they were used to before I started using SchoolAI, at the beginning of every class with my 9th grade students, they would come in, they would answer a question that was on a slide deck, they'd type it into their Google Doc, and then I'd ask for volunteers. And so I would have the same 5 kids that would raise their hand every single day. And I hate cold calling on kids, like randomly selecting them. It makes me probably more anxious than it makes them even. So what I started doing once I started launching these spaces with them is while they were working, I would look at the insights, but I would also kind of give a quick glance through students who I hadn't heard from in a while when they were sharing. And I would look at their chats and then I would tell them, okay, I'm going to take a couple volunteers. Now I'm going to randomly call on people from that I saw in their chats really great things you were sharing that I think everyone else needs to know about. And telling them that I've already read your answer. I know it's good. So you don't have to be worried when I call on you about whether or not your answer is right. I'm telling you it's right. And that was such a powerful moment for me and for my kids to be able to empower them that what you're sharing is valuable. You might not have the self-confidence to be able to think that it's powerful or that it's valuable, but I'm telling you, I've read it. It's great. I want everyone to hear it. And then I would give them sort of a leading question as to which part of their chat I wanted them to answer. Or if there was lots of good gems, I would just call on them and say, share something from your chat. You had such a great conversation about this topic. And so it's really showing them that this data, this personalized interaction that they're getting is really giving them the autonomy to have control over their own learning, but also that I'm using this data to be a better teacher for them. Does that answer your question? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so JP put a great question in the chat that I really want to make sure that I talk about. When I design my spaces, each one of these spaces has sort of a pre-prompt to it as to what type of learning experience we want it to have. But let's say I go over to Sidekick and, I tell it I want it to provide math practice problems. I can prompt the AI to only behave in a way that I want it to. So if I wanted to give math practice problems, I can say require students to ask or to try the problems at least twice before giving them the answer. If I tell it I wanted to help them brainstorm writing topics, I can say, do not write any part of their essay for them. And so it's really designed to only allow them to interact in the space that I am giving them, in the capabilities that I am telling them. Now, the reason you were able to, that Ben was able to kind of get it to write a 5-paragraph essay is because the way that I've prompted this space is to kind of provide you an opportunity to see what SchoolAI can do for, you, what AI can do, what it has the capability to do. But typically, it is going to stay very concisely in the areas that I have designated for it, and I can put those additional safety measures in place to only allow them to have specific types of interactions. What questions do y'all have about that? Great. All right, I'm going to bounce over back to my slide deck presentation just to go through just a few more things with you. Now, thinking about your students that you are teaching, oh yes, I will definitely show a level text. I want to make sure I show a couple of examples of spaces so you can grab these before we have to wrap up. So spaces are really designed for learning experiences. Now, if you have elementary students, the next couple of slides are going to be elementary specific spaces. So if you want to scan that QR code, you're welcome to scan it and then engage with the space later on. Just so you can see different examples, different learning examples. So this one is one that Casey, our community manager, who was a teacher and tech coach in Jordan School District in Utah, that she had developed, which is, it's just so stinking cute, this stuck in a snow globe. Here's another one about elapsed time. So this is a math specific one. So these are some different examples of how, we can use these different spaces to create different learning experiences. So I'm about to click to the next one. So if you want to grab that one, grab it quick. Here's another one that is for social studies for elementary kids in colonial times. This is a little simulation experience where students can experience what it was like for students during colonial times. And then we've got some middle school ones, right? So this is one that we would use for middle school. This is a sidekick. Students can research Supreme Court cases, right? Give them cases that support their research topic and explain the case in student-friendly language. So this is an assistant that provides them with different court cases. Here's another immersive experience. This is Angel Island immigration experience. So again, we can use AI to create this like role player game experience for students to help them be able to make connections with what people were experiencing during this immigration period. Here's one about, so here's a high school one now. How are you trying to persuade me this time? This is, all about an interactive rhetoric game. So thinking about these different, ethos, logos, and pathos, and, how are you, using this sort of rhetorical experience. Here's a personal finance one. So this is another role player game, Salt Lake City job budget and spending. And, this was our teacher dashboard. So let me go take a look at that. And then I do want to make sure that, JP says the role-playing game has been a huge hit during the test runs with some of the kiddos in history classes. I love that. Role-player games are some of my favorite because simulations and scenarios for kids is such a powerful learning experience. But for educators, it is so much work to create. I remember making like simulations and scenarios in my science classes and just like the amount of like cutting pieces of paper apart and like trying to give them all this unique experience and then spending 25 minutes trying to explain how the simulation worked and then having kids be totally confused. It was a lot. But creating this space takes me a matter of minutes and gives them all a personalized experience where they can ask questions. I get all the data, so I'm not just trying to like frantically watch what they're doing. I'm getting some actual good quality data from it. All right, so the request was for me to show text leveling. So I'm going to pop back over to our tools. So let's say I've got let me grab some text. We'll do like the Gettysburg Address just because I saw it there. Actually, I'm just gonna let's see if this works. So, level the Gettysburg Address for 3rd grade reading level. Let's see if it does that without me having to actually paste in the text. It'll be a fun game. There we go. Yeah. So simplified for 3rd grade. So imagine going from the actual Gettysburg Address, you know, it's not super long, but we've got it here. There it is, appropriate for 3rd grade. I could change the grade level to 6th grade. Change it here. Get rid of that one. Regenerate. See how it changes that level. There we go. So here's the original text. Here's the text leveling translation. The original text leveling translation. Pretty cool. You can run different spaces. Yeah, I love this that JP is adding. You can run different spaces for the different levels in your class without the kids even knowing what space that they're in. Yeah, so you can individually personalize this for their specific needs. All right. What questions do y'all have? I know we're at time, but I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer any questions you have.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Hi, Betsy. I am curious if I'm a teacher and can I like see some of the things that have already been done, like what you showed, the snow globe, the thing like that? Or am I putting a prompt in for every thing?
Yeah. So as a teacher, you can go to the Discover page. This has over 2 million pre-created and customizable spaces. So we've got spaces for every standard. We have these customizable spaces that are appropriate for all grades, all grade levels, all grade levels, all subject areas rather. We have some different featured collections. So these featured collections are really fun. I know we've been running some History Comes to Life with these are chat with historical figures in some classes. I saw some awesome ideas from a 5th grade class where they were chatting with, it was Abraham Lincoln, right? Was it Abraham Lincoln or George Washington? I'm trying to remember. George Washington. Yeah. And the conversation was about, everybody was asking different questions, obviously, but somebody had mentioned to them that he powdered his hair, and everyone wanted to know more about what that meant, which I just love. I think that is just the magic of empowering students with being able to have their own conversations about their learning, right? So these are all collections that we have created as a SchoolAI team, but you can also search for other spaces that other people have created. So like these are all specific to like back to school and using SchoolAI, but you've got this crazy lady right here who's made over 255 spaces. It's me, just in case you didn't know. But I make spaces for everything. I make spaces for social studies, for literature. I made this one day we were on a staff meeting and we were talking about Bluey because a lot of us have young kids. And so I made this, which Bluey character space are you? You know, if you know, you know, it's all about the Bluey. Skit generators. I've made role-playing activities, you know, individualized learning goals for students to be able to create for themselves. So you can really create anything that you can think of. And so even if you're not at that point where you are creating something, you can search for it. So if I wanted to search like, I'm trying to think of something to search. This is where my brain always like pauses. If I just search George Washington, let's see what else is out there about George Washington. So here's a bunch of chat with George Washington that other people have made specifically for their own purpose. We've got George Washington Carver in here, right? So some other great ones. So lots of really cool experiences that you can create or search for. What other questions do y'all have?
Once I'm going to go back to finding these that are already created. So once I find one, I can change it any way I, okay.
Yep. So, and
Wow.
JP mentioned that. So let's say I wanted to pull this George Washington Carver one, and I wanted to see like how this was written. I can do a couple of things. I always preview my spaces as an educator before I put them in front of students, because I want to know that if I didn't make it, and even if I did make it, I want to know that it's going to behave the way that I want it to with my students. But if I've previewed it and I like it, but maybe I just want to change the grade level. So maybe if I preview this, this is more towards like a higher grade level. So this is maybe too much text. I'm going to instead stay second grade, and let's see how that changes things a little bit. So, oh, no, that did not really change the preview too much. Let me try that again. Okay, so it gives, I like the way that it's formatting it. I wonder if this is actually for that grade level. So I can actually remix any space that anybody has made in this little 3-dot menu. Okay, so that's not a whole lot of prompting in there. It's kind of impressive that they got it to do all of that. So I can edit all of this, or I can do it in the more options as well. And then save the space for myself.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What other questions do y'all have?
Hey, Maureen, can you hear?
Yeah, we have, hold on, JP, we have one more question.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just had a question. My name is Melissa, and my kids are younger, so what age is this, does this start for children?
So I have seen educators use these as young as kindergarten. And the reality is the only difference in this experience is the way that educators are first modeling it. So when I train like my younger grade teachers, I tell them, model what this student experience looks like. Show them, do a space together, put it on the board. Maybe it's like a question and answer space. Maybe it's a curiosity space. Maybe it's a book explorer. Book explorer is one of my favorite spaces for elementary because they can literally do any kind of book that they are reading or curious about and ask questions about that book topic. And so modeling it first for students for a couple of days, maybe a week, maybe a couple of weeks, depending upon how young they are, is a great way to kind of get this started. Now, what I want to show you also, I got to go and resume my space because I was being naughty. And so that way you can see it on my end. Additional features that we have to support younger learners as well as students who have exceptional needs. We have the speak button. So this can read the AI's text to them. We also have the speech to text dictation button that allows them to speak into the microphone and then have it dictate into the text for them. So these two are really, really valuable for those younger learners or for any students who need these accommodation pieces, things that will make this more accessible for them. So yeah, and the interaction content and quantity does change substantially when you make the space for younger students. Does that answer your question?
When you say quantity, do you mean the length of time?
The length of text, like the amount of text.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there like a time limit that you use for educators that are working with younger children?
So I mean, this is where that sort of, professional practice kind of comes in. When teachers, all our spaces are designed to be Socrative and to go on forever and ever and ever. And so this is where that kind of professional practice comes in. When I would launch a bell ringer with my students to explore a topic, I gave them 5 minutes. And so for my, my high schoolers, they needed like a checkpoint of quality. So I would tell them 3 high quality interactions. That's what I'm expecting from you in 5 minutes. But depending upon who your kiddos are, if we're talking kindergarteners, I'd probably give them 5 to 10 minutes in a space of their interaction time, just because the attention span is a little bit shorter. But high schoolers, you could potentially give them 20 plus minutes in a space, depending upon the learning experience. So that the 2 major factors are the age of the students and the learning experience of the space as to what kind of time you're giving them to interact. And this is, again, this is just goes back to good teaching practices. We know our kids, we know what their attention span is, we know how much time they need to be able to complete certain activities and experiences. So it's really bringing this in as just a tool. This is not taking the place of good learning and good instruction.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
Maybe, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to kind of to chime in a little bit. You know, here at Trident, we are definitely not using this as like, okay, well, today we're going to learn about George Washington, and then the students sit on it for 45 minutes, and then they have a quiz in 2 days. How we're going to use it is like, for example, when we introduced it with George Washington, you know, I was in that class and I kind of said, you know what, guys, run away with this. Ask him some things that, you know, you didn't learn about already about George Washington. And that's where the wig question came up. So how that worked was one of our students, and this was the best part about it, is a student that rarely participates in class. She's one of our shyer students. But she asked George Washington, is it true that you wore a wig? And he went into detail that he didn't actually wear a wig. It's actually his real hair. And then she went on to the conversation with, you know, but why is it so gray? And then he went into the powdering example. But the best part about it all was all the students kind of all surrounded her computer at that time. And she was asking the questions and getting the answers. And it allowed her to discover things about George Washington that interest her. And we would use that in terms of like, obviously an older student, a middle school or up student, to create a project on a, you know, specific person like George Washington after we have studied George Washington, right? This isn't something that we're going to introduce and say, you know, everything that this feeds, you're going to be quizzed on. This would be more of a self-discovery type of tool that we're going to be using here at Trident. And it also gives a student like this specific student a voice in class when they don't really have or comfortable yet to ask questions in class. So it was a really amazing thing to watch, especially with this specific student.
Love that. Yeah, this is a tool.
Correct.
Much like anything, like a textbook.
Right. And how I explained it to them,
higher level.
Yeah, and how I explained it to them is like, you know, I can give you a sledgehammer and say, go ahead and use it, but I want to teach you how to use it before you use it. And that's really what we're going to be doing in Q1 for our students, is teaching them how to do it and use it before we allow them to actually run and use it. For our lower students, our teachers have been instructed to really run this more in like, especially our, you know, our 1 through 3rd graders, to really run it as full group instruction. I don't want them on their computers doing this on their own just yet, but I do want them exposed to it. So then when they get to, you know, 5th grade, they are able to understand how to interact with this on a social level.
Great. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I hope this was valuable to you. I hope you were able to kind of see what the power is in this experience. And I am so looking forward to continuing my work with Trident to support the educators to see what kind of amazing, cool things your kids are doing with this. So keep me posted if you need anything.
Awesome. Thank you, Mauren.
Thanks, Mauren.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right.